Notice is hereby given that a special meeting of the District School Board of School District Number 24J, Marion County, Salem, Oregon, is called for 6 p.m. Tuesday, October 20th, 2014, in Room 2 at the Support Services Center, 2575 Commercial Street, Southeast Salem. This meeting is called to take action on appointing a Budget Committee member and to take action on approval of personnel actions. Christy, could you call roll, please?
Rick Kimball,
Here.
Nancy McMorris-Oddix. Here. Chris Brantley does not appear to be present. Jeff Fayville.
Here.
Jim Green.
Here.
Paul Kylo.
Here.
Chuck Lee.
Here.
Thank you, Christy. Our first action item, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Terry over here.
No, we're so far apart tonight. It's hard to.
What's your name?
All right, so we're going to pick up a little bit where we left off with the Budget Committee appointment. And if you'll recall, at the last board meeting, we were struggling a bit to fill the last remaining vacancy. So at this time, there is one vacancy. 4 citizens were appointed at the October 14th, 2014 school board meeting. The remaining vacancy is a 3-year term ending June 30th, 2017. The 4 citizens who were appointed, because there has been a bit of confusion about this, are Lloyd Chapman for a 3-year term, Betty Patacoli for a 3-year term, Levi Herrera Lopez for a 2-year term, and Larry Trott for a 1-year term. So we have 3 people left, and we have 1 position, and so we need to do a vote on that 1 position.
Well, you guys are quick. Thank you.
They're turning in their ballots.
Practice this.
Okay.
Rick.
We'll give Chris a minute to
Oh, good.
get his seat here. Chris, we're at the point of where we're going to vote on the candidates for the last seat on the Budget Committee. Thank you, Christy. We've got 3 good candidates to choose from. They're all well qualified. We'll do the balloting, and if we still have nobody with 4 votes, we'll eliminate the one with the lowest one on the first round and do a second round with the 2 top ones, okay? All right. I think Christy, or not Christy, Mary's going to take these, right? Thank you.
You want me to read them, or you got it?
Jason, can you do it for us?
Perfect.
Okay, we have 1 vote for Rothweiler. Well, we do not have a signature on the ballot, so.
The name should be on the ballot, Jay, up near the top, maybe our name.
Okay, so that's Chair Kimball, sorry. Yes, Chair Kimball votes for Rothweiler. Director Kylo votes for Kohler. There it is. Director Green votes for Rothweiler. Director McMorris-Oddix votes for Crosley. Director Lee votes for Kohler. Director Brantley votes Kohler. Director Fayville votes Kohler.
Okay, so our last sitting person to be appointed to the Budget Committee by the board is Adam Kohler. We have 4 votes for Adam, so let's welcome Adam to the committee. Is Adam in the audience by chance? No, okay. All right, so that's our main action item. We have an adoption of the consent calendar. We have 2 personnel actions on here, the contract approval for Assistant Superintendent Kelly Carlisle, as well as some administrative personnel actions. So I'll entertain them. Does anybody need to pull an item first? Chuck?
I was going to move.
Okay.
So
Anybody need to pull? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to
I'll
adopt.
move the motion.
Moved by Chuck, seconded by Jeff. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous, Christie. Okay, that concludes our action tonight. It's not a typical business meeting, so we don't have audience communication, so I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting. All right, we're going to start our work session now. I have a call to do. Notice is hereby given that a work session of the Salem-Keizer School Board, District 24J of Marion County, Salem, Oregon, is called for 6:30 p.m. or at the conclusion of the special meeting, Tuesday, October 28, 2014, in Room 2 at the Support Services Center, 2575 Commercial Street Southeast, Salem, Oregon. This meeting is called for student achievement, and it's 5 minutes after 6. As far as the roll goes, I'm going to show on the record that all members are present for this work session. And I will turn the agenda over to Superintendent Perry.
All right, we're gonna work on the projector. I think it's, there, it's coming up. Okay, and do we have handouts for the board yet? Have they, you should have a PowerPoint handout that looks like. You have them, okay. So Christie will get those for you. This already working too. Okay. You, just so you know how I have set this up, you have a few more people around the table, I think, than what would be typical for your student achievement report. I thought it was really important that you hear from the people that really supervise directly the work in our schools around student achievement, because they have the even closer pulse on our student achievement results. So that's why you have the level directors plus curriculum director plus special ed director at the table with us, in addition to Salam. Salam might be thinking it's just because, you know, he's handing this off, but we would have done it whether he was leaving or not. So I think it's really important that they're able to articulate for you where we're making progress, where we are not making progress, and some of the reasons for that. So with that, I'm going to take the first portion for you, and there are a lot of slides, and I'm going to try to kind of go through kind of what I see as the high level points. But let me tell you what our goals are for tonight. So we're going to review our achievement data as it relates to the board's results policy. I know at the board retreat we had a discussion about wanting to really dig a little deeper into that results policy. I see tonight as step one in a process, because I think by the time you get to the end of tonight, you'll want to just take a step back and kind of digest that information a little bit. So this will be our review of the results policy, the overview of a couple of the achievement compact measures, just so you're reminded that those are also some points that we look at as far as student achievement. And then you'll also receive an update on the strategic plan focus number 2. So we're combining presentation on the results policy and our strategic plan focus number 2 regarding preparing students for college and career. So I just want to kind of walk you through and do some reminders about who we are. I know you've seen this before, but I think it's really important for us to remember kind of the mix that we have within our school district. So 59% of our kids live in poverty. 25% hear a language other than English at home. 19% are learning English. 15% have special education needs, and we have 8% are talented and gifted. And we are almost evenly split as a white 50% and minority district. The bulk of our minority groups are our Hispanic population at 40%. So I know that that has really grown in the last several years in this district. Another important point is about our English language learners. By grade, 80% of our English language learners are in the elementary school. And this is an important fact as you relate it to our student achievement results, especially at the elementary level. And I think in my mind, I look at that as that's really good news, because we're getting them young and we have the systems in place to help them become fluent in English. So you'll see as they progress, we have fewer kids in the ELL program. So 13% at middle school and 6% at our high school. If we've had kids in our system all the way through and at high school they're still in ELL, there's oftentimes multiple factors that go into why they are still struggling to learn English. So that's kind of our group by our demographics for our ELL group. In the results policy, there will be an increase of the percentage of students in the subgroups who meet or exceed the state benchmarks in reading, writing, science, math, and English. The district will use Oregon statewide assessment and the English language proficiency assessment data to determine results. And we know that with SBAC, as a board, you're going to want to look at this year anyway, and think about how do we transition from old system to new system to what do these results really mean for the future. and that the percentage of students completing high school through their participation in any district sanctioned programs will be increased each year. So I want to put the data in context for you. This is our third grade reading scores, and it doesn't matter which schools these are at, but these are all our elementary schools lined up with a bar graph. The red line is the average achievement of our third graders. So what you see is some really low performing elementary schools and also really high percentage performing elementary schools, which gives you the average, but there's lots of variance among our elementary schools as far as their achievement. Maybe I was taking your guys' part, but no? Maybe I'm taking your part. We didn't have little notes on who starts where, so, but I think that's really important because what I will tell you about our data, and I think this is the thing to keep track of most of the night. We're going to show you a lot of things, but what I will tell you overall is I think we could do better in our elementary school performance. But as our kids work through the system, our scores get better and better. So we have really good performance at middle school, really good performance at high school, but our elementary school performance still struggles. There's a piece of that that's language, and there's another piece of that that I think we just need to be much more intentional about our work in our elementary schools. That's kind of my 90-day assessment when I look at our achievement and I look at what's gone on. Goes on within our elementary schools is we really have got to get a laser-like focus and really that attention to bringing up the standards. So if you think of that in terms of the context of our data, I want you just, as you get all the graphs, just think of that trend. Elementary performance is lower, but as we get through the system, we have lots to celebrate when they get through to our high schools. So, go ahead. Okay, what did I miss?
Well, you stole my slide.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Well, you know, Salam.
You did that
Come on.
really well.
Yeah.
I was going to say, well, maybe I don't need to do this. No. I think just a couple of things. I want to touch on two things. One is the process we're going to use to go through the data. We have a lot of information to throw at you, and okay. So,
Sorry, Salam, it's not quite close enough.
okay. So is this better? No?
No, don't hold it down,
Oh,
just
don't
a
hold
little
it down.
closer. Yeah.
Okay.
Gotta get
Thanks.
really close.
So a couple of things. One is process-wise, we would like to go through these segments by segment. So as we get into the level data, we'd like you to hold your questions, if you don't mind, until the elementary set is done, and then we will move into the middle school and high school. I think that way we can give you enough time to ask questions and discuss and then move on. The other thing that I wanted to mention relative to the data, and Christy did a nice job covering it with this slide in particular, is that we're dealing with the law of averages. So all the data we're going to present you tonight is not school-specific. It's not area-specific. It's all about averages. And as you can see from this slide, I counted 21 of our schools that actually exceed this average, and potentially, I think they also exceed the state average. We have about 5 that are slightly below, and we've got about 10, and those are the ones that Christy described, that are really need some focused attention, and the level directors will be able to share with you what we're doing to address that. Those would be our focus in our taught schools, the Title I other schools that we're monitoring very closely. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is when we show you subgroup data, it's broken out by ethnicity, but also we have the special ed students and the ELLs, the English language learners. Keep in mind that these groups are also part of the ethnic group that's on that slide. So they are double counted at times. We just want to make sure you have that as context and background. So I think with that, we can go to elementary ed.
So who are we as elementary level? We have 42 comprehensive schools with 2 charter programs. The largest school has over 650 students. 19 of our schools are identified as Title I, so high levels of poverty. 31% are ELs, 15% special ed, and 63.4% of our elementary students are economically disadvantaged. Altogether, we serve 19,520 students in the K through 5. 3.5% are talented and gifted, and 1.5% are homeless. That's who we are. So what you're going to see in the next several slides is a basic downward trend and trending below the state average for reading and math and science. I'll orient you to the slides as we go, but what we'll do after we finish looking at the data is give you some information about what it is we're doing to address this downward trend for the last 3 years. So here's the first slide. It shows grades 3, 4, and 5 for the years 11, 12, 12, 13, and 13, 14 in comparison for average score for reading at those grade levels. And so you can see that downward trend, and you can see that our highest level is just below the 60% mark across the board for the current year. In this slide, it's all the same year, the 13-14 school year, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades. The red line is the district, and the dotted black line is the state. So we trend along the same line as the state, but we are below the state average. Similarly, and then the third slide, the third part of this, is our disaggregated data by ethnic group and student population. And you can see our special ed and EL students on the end. So again, 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14 comparison in reading. We move to math, our reading scores at the 4th grade for that disaggregated piece. Likewise, 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14. And then the 5th grade. Similarly in math, the 3 years for total population with the downward trend, and with the last current year, 60-ish%, just under 60%. Again, trending below the state average, but in the same pattern as the state. And this is the 1 year, 13-14 year, for all 3 grade levels. Disaggregated math scores for 3rd grade for the 3 years. And again, you see the overall downward trend. Again, some of our groups performing a bit better than others. 4th grade, same story. And 5th grade. The next slide is our 5th grade science from last year, 13-14. And you see that we're below the state average, but we are at 63%. And disaggregated by the last 3 years, so 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14, by ethnicity and student groups. And you do see some growth among some of our student groups, but in general, the downward trend and below the state average for the previous slide. So, what are we doing? How are we addressing these?
As Salam said about our 5 schools that are performing below, they're getting extensive in-service on data teams and PLCs where trainers are going in and working with principals and teachers and coaches. And a lot of our other schools are getting that same training. And that training is really focused on the Common Core state standards. So teachers are learning how to deconstruct those standards. What do kids have to know and be able to do to really understand those standards? That's just so important, and they get to work in teams to figure that out instead of just having to do this by themselves. They're talking about what are those high leverage instructional strategies that we can use that doesn't matter which classroom you go into in a 3rd grade. All those 3rd grade classrooms, teachers will be using those same high leverage instructional strategies. And then what are we going to do when kids aren't getting it? So there's pre and post assessments going on as they're teaching those skills. We're not waiting till 9 weeks to figure out what to do. They're doing those little exit tickets to see if kids are getting it or not. a lot of the schools are doing these school-wide data analysis systems where they're really looking at differentiating instruction for all kids. And when we say all kids, it means the kids who are below and kids who are meeting and those kids that are tagged, those kids that are above. How are we supporting their needs too? So, examples are like data walls and data rooms, and we had a slide that just didn't get put into it, and I'm just going to pass it out where you get to see how schools are looking at each student and figuring out, and when at teams, it's the counselor and the SPED teacher and the I don't know, social workers, they all get together and they figure out what's going on with these kids. One school found last year that 60 kids needed vision testing. They couldn't see or hearing. They're doing school visits, figuring out attendance, making sure that home visits are done so we get the kids to school. So they're all figuring that out and making sure that interventions are happening. Sometimes there's 2 to 3 doses of interventions along with the main core instruction going on. They're trying to catch those kids. Kindergarten assessments that are given at the beginning of the school year, we're finding where kids are, 67% of the kids in a classroom are coming in with 0 skills. And so kindergarten teachers are working on catching these kids up so that they're ready to read by, they're reading at 3rd grade. Our SPED and ELs, our SPED teachers are really focused on standard-based IEPs now. And they're working with a classroom teacher on these are the standards, and we want to make sure that the SPED teacher is supporting the standards. A lot of our schools are trying to do the push-in model where special ed teachers are going into the classroom instead of pulling 1 or 2 kids. It's going into the classroom and supporting more kids so that it's affecting more kids than 1 or 2. Our ELs, there's ongoing professional development for teachers. We have ELAs, and these coaches go into the schools and work with the PLCs and do training for our EL teachers. And then there's that embedded ELD instruction going on so kids have that language development. They can access it through content. So those are some of the things that we're doing. And then having smaller class sizes. This year, we're seeing a difference in that too.
So I'm just going to make a quick statement about elementary because it seems a little bit like a bad news. Remember the numbers of schools we have that are high-performing schools, and I've taken a really strategic step, I think, in the change of the elementary supervision model, which you got as information a few weeks back, to put some urgency around our lowest-performing schools. We have a great partnership with ODE. We have plenty of supports in those buildings now, and I've really tried to align the resources and remove the barriers from those schools so that they can really focus on the 2 or 3 high leverage things, good instruction, really attention to the academic performance of kids in those schools. So I believe with this slight course correction, we're on the right track. There will be some things I believe I may bring forward as budget items around some instructional materials at the elementary level, things that the board perhaps would act on in a budget cycle. And the other thing we're going to really need to attend to is full-day kindergarten. When we have about 63% of our kids coming in below the state average in their readiness for kindergarten, full-day kindergarten will be one thing that will really help that, which again will be something that will come forward in our budget recommendations. So we're pushing forward hard with full-day K as one of our responses, and we're really closely connected with the early learning work as another one of our responses, because that preschool and that early learning work is also going to be critical for our kids and families so that they're coming in kindergarten ready. So while not the greatest of news in some of those poor performing schools, I think we've done some switching and alignment to show some results.
Excellent. So we want to pause and see if you have any questions for Mira and Sandy before we proceed to middle schools.
Nancy, go ahead, and then Jim.
So the data looked to me like it, and to you because you described it, has gone down for 3 years. What of these supports are new this year, and which of these supports have been in place since the data started dropping?
That's a really good question. We've had PLCs in place for several years. The difference in the training that we're providing to some of our schools, and we're phasing it in for the rest of our schools, is to deepen the practices around the use of data, primarily for instructional strategies. So you hear data and you think numbers, but it's really about the instruction and seeing if the instruction is having the desired effect. And so as teachers are partnering in this powerful way, they're able to more quickly address needs of students. What you heard Mira describe about they're looking at individual student needs on a regular basis and addressing those needs, that's part of that process. And it's not that it wasn't being done before, I just don't think it was as systematic or systemic. So that's part of what we're looking at. And with the ELD piece, we are seeing some great results from the ELPA results, from a push on, again, systematic implementation of English language development in all of the schools.
Can I
Go ahead
just
and follow up, yeah.
Also, I was curious when I was thinking about the fact that the data seemed the most troublesome in the elementary. If it seems to me that we've had significant cuts over the last bunch of years, and that increased class size, decreased instruction time would have a greater impact on elementary. I mean, you can say to high school students, you know, we're short time, so you have to do this on your own, or middle school or late elementary, but it's tough to say that to a kindergartner, you know.
Right.
Try to self-learn this at home, so that you would have the biggest impact. Is that accurate, and is that maybe why the state data also came back down as well?
Could be. And, you know, we are really focused on what we can do, what can happen as soon as that child walks into that door. And so that's what teachers are doing, and that's where Sandy was saying that they're really focused in on making sure those instructional strategies are in place. But right, when you have an example of 65% of your, you know, kindergarten kids coming in with zero skills, and you have 2.5 hours, and you're trying to really, and you still are looking at those kids that are above grade level in kindergarten. You want to make sure their needs are being met too. So you have to differentiate, but those kids that are down here at the 0 level, you've got to give them 2 to 3 doses of extra support. And that's where Christy's talking about that, you know, if we have all-day kindergarten, that would be great support.
Okay, Jim, and then we'll go to
Okay,
Chris.
I've got a couple of
Go ahead.
So a couple of them are pretty easy. What does the red line on that slide mean again?
This is our district average.
That's the district average.
District average.
Okay.
And the state average is slightly above that.
Yeah.
Not by much.
And then the next slide down where you say 63.4% of our students are economically disadvantaged. Is that the state definition of poverty?
It's based on the state and federal definition of poverty, so it's census data.
So is it based on the state school fund distribution of poverty?
Well, we look at it, I think, in a couple of ways. We do look at the state school fund distribution of poverty, but we also look at the students that identify as on free and reduced lunch.
Okay. So the other thing I'd like to see, and I know it would have added many slides to this, but when we show a slide that shows our reading scores for 4th grade and you break it out by subgroup, I'd like to see how we compare with the statewide average from those subgroups.
Oh, from subgroups, yeah.
Yeah, the broken out so we can see how our ELL students in 2013-14 are doing to the state. I think that's an important comparator for us to know. The other thing is, what is our testing penetration rate at the elementary level? And that's going to be a question for the middle school and high school ones too. I just kind of want to know what's our penetration rate for testing? Because it says students who took the test, average score of SKSD elementary students who took the test. I'm wondering just what our penetration rates were.
You have,
Yeah, I think it's pretty high, but
it's the percentage of
He's talking about how
participation.
many
Particip-
Oh, yeah, really high.
yeah.
Yes.
Over
And
95%.
so
probably.
here's the really, really tough question. Why are we trending down and why are we below the state? And I've heard some presuppositions for that, but I haven't heard hard, fast. This is why we believe, looking at the data we've got, knowing the kids we've got, talking to our principals, talking to our teachers, why are we trending down and why are we below the state?
So I'm going to attempt to provide you an answer, but I want to make sure that it doesn't sound like an excuse, because we recognize that we do have some challenges at the elementary level and throughout our system, and I believe we are attempting to address them with the right strategies and the right interventions. And these are not new challenges. I think we're getting a lot more skilled and better skilled at dealing with those challenges. I think a couple of things. One is, for the elementary level in particular, you have to keep in mind that the cut scores were changed 2 years ago.
Right.
And whenever there is a cut score, that the performance tends to fluctuate. Our students' performance didn't necessarily decline, but the cut score was actually increased. So we may have held steady, but when you report on the data, it may show that we're declining. Again, recognizing that there's a lot of work and a lot of heavy lifting still needs to happen at the elementary level to improve. The other thing is that we've been in a transition mode for the last 3 years with the Common Core State Standards. We've made a conscious decision to launch into implementation before the state did. And I think that had an impact instructionally on our teachers and our students. Also, as we shifted to Common Core State Standards, we refocused our attention on math, because the Common Core State Standards in mathematics in particular are a lot more rigorous, a lot more demanding, and our teachers needed to get training and professional development and increase their skills and capacity in that area. So these are some of the qualitative, if you will. I don't know that they're hard and fast, but these are variables that contribute to these dips in performance at times. I think a great majority of our schools, if we were to go back to that slide that shows you the averages, you can see which schools are struggling. And it is schools with students that have a need for language development. A lot of them are English is their second language. And that's when we get into the middle school data, you'll see that once they become proficient in English and they advance in their language acquisition and development, they do quite well. And actually, we're going to show you some cohort data that is phenomenal in my opinion, because those students outperform the native language speakers in some categories. So I appreciate the question. I think it's a valid question, and these are some of the contributing variables. They're not, hard and fact, so to speak, but they're variables that do impact the learning environment and its impact on students. And we're going to show you cohort data later on, and you'll see how those students are doing in middle and high once they adapt to our system and have the language skills to be successful, especially the academic language skills.
So Salam, I don't see that as an excuse. That's kind of the answer I anticipated. I also anticipated the fact that you would say, look at our student demographics in our elementary schools. And when you compare us to other districts across the state, we have some of the highest percentage of ELL. We have some of the highest of what we term to be economically disadvantaged or living in poverty within the state. And those are real challenges at the elementary level when you have that percentage of ELL and that level of poverty coming into our elementary schools.
Yeah.
I'm assuming our staff are seeing that, trying to address that as best we can, and we're trying to move forward.
Yeah. And if I may add, I think you're absolutely spot on, Jim. And the fact that we have 3 program models to support our English language learners is a demonstration of our commitment to our English language learner student population. And it's something that takes a tremendous amount of resources and effort on our part. And staffing becomes a challenge when you're trying to sort of diversify your approach and your strategy to English language development. Staffing become a challenge, and that has an impact on student performance. When you don't have staff that are fluent in the language of the student, and you're using their native language to develop their English speaking capacity, then that becomes a barrier. Again, it's not an excuse, these are facts. This is the reality that we deal with. So, thank you.
Chris?
I have two thoughts as I looked at the data. The first one is, you're showing us the results of all of our students, and one of the things that I'm always interested in is looking at students who have been with us all 3 of those years. And because I don't recall seeing any transients data to tell me what percentage of our student body turns over every year, it would be interesting to me to be able to see what our data looks like just with students that have been with us all 3 years. I know it's fairly typical for lower socioeconomic areas to have high transients, and so that's just an interesting thing to me to see if that's affecting us in any way. The second one is, I'm assuming you've done this, but that first chart, the one that shows all the elementary schools, I'm wondering if you have reordered that so that the lines show up in order of socioeconomic level or poverty level or ELL level or whatever it is, and look to see if there's any, I want to call them outliers, but they're not outliers, to see if there's any that are in the lower socioeconomic, lower, higher ELL populations that are outperforming the others, and then done the backup analysis, and this is what I would, as a board member, would be interested in, is saying that these strategies that we've hung our hat on in this district that we're implementing in all of our other schools are in fact happening in those schools that are the outliers in the lower end of the spectrum. So those are just questions that sort of dig deeper. And I'm sort of like Jim, I think by the time you put all the slides in here, I'd like it, we'd be here for 3 days. But those are the kinds of questions that I'm messing around with in my head and would appreciate getting more insight in them.
I'm just taking notes of some of the additional questions.
Any, Paul, you?
I do, but Nancy can go first, certainly.
You go first.
No, go ahead.
I already had a turn.
That's,
Go
I
ahead.
understand.
Like the chipmunks from Disney. No, you go first. You go first.
I thought that one of the things that was changing in the schools' report cards this year is that they would be compared to schools that were like them demographically. And I don't see anything in here that really looks at how our schools
Go ahead. Yeah.
are compared to schools that look like them.
So I'm going to take you back to Superintendent Perry's framing statements early on that the data we're presenting you is based on results policy. So we're reporting to you on results policy. The report card does use this data to generate a score for the school, but we're not prepared to share that with you because we hadn't planned on it since it's the results policy. But very quickly, the report card looks at 3 sets of data. One is the percentage of students that have achieved the standard, the benchmark for that grade level, the percentage of students that have made growth. They may not have achieved the target, but made growth, and then the percentage of subgroups, the percentage of the subgroup student population that also made growth. Achievement is worth 25%, growth is worth 50%, and subgroup growth is worth 25%. So that's where the report card score from 1 to 5 is generated. And we can bring you information back if you want, but we have not included that in this report because the results policy does not focus on it.
So the reason I asked the question is I heard something on OPB that talked about our schools, and it was talking about elementary, I thought, that talked about how our schools, our high-need schools were outperforming similar high-need schools in other districts, and that they were calling out 4 large districts, and we were the first that they were talking about. So it seemed like that there was some good news in there that in schools with challenging populations, we're doing as well or better with that challenging population as others.
I think in some cases we are. And that report card data will show that. I'll try to pull something together on that.
Okay, Paul?
If you could go back a couple of slides to the disaggregate information.
Where's the,
Readings. Keep
I
going.
have it,
Oh.
I'm going back.
okay.
Okay, keep going. two more. Thank you. I look at these charts, and I find them fascinating that the reading scores at grade 4, the American Indian, Alaska Native, they actually show an upward trend. I also look at the multiracial grouping, and they're showing an upward trend. And the special ed, I can't tell if that's even or not, just because of the blur in my eyes, I guess. But at least two groups there are showing that they're going up. Are we doing something special for them? Or is that just a quirk of whatever's happening?
Well, I know that we have a very robust American Indian Alaska Native program
Okay,
in instructional services.
okay.
We actually had an opportunity to tour the summer school this year, and they've had it for several years.
Okay, go to the next slide. The reading score is grade 5. Thank you. Again, the American Indian, Alaska Native, Asian Pacific Islander seem to be going in the right direction. The white group is doing a bounce back up, and the special ed is actually starting to do a bounce back up. What are we doing there that's suddenly making the big difference in those 4 groups? Or do we know?
Did you ask about the special ed?
No, I'm asking about all
All
four,
four
all
of them.
4 groups.
4 groups.
You've got 4 categories there.
Paul?
Yeah.
I can speak to the American Indian Native Alaskan comment
Okay.
because that does come out of, the support does come out of instructional services.
Okay,
Shelby Olson-Rogers, the program assistant for our Indian Ed program within the Salem-Keizer School District, has a very robust system of support that she has built collaboration and partnerships with our area tribe representatives, specifically Grand Ronde. And so she runs every Thursday evening tutoring sessions for not only the students and also the parents at our schools that are taught by some of our teachers.
okay,
And she has partnered long-term with those teachers. So those teachers built strong relationships with our families and the students. And then she also works on a 3 to 4 week summer school program that focuses on standards-based instruction within math and reading, while also tying in cultural components for students to not only gain cultural awareness, but also academic skills so they don't have a summer lag.
okay, so looking at the data there, then is this robust program being considered to be duplicated, cloned,
Yeah, that's a great
other
question.
places, or is this just an aberration?
I can know Melissa Cole can speak about the middle school summer academies, and we have built in other summer academy programs for students at the elementary level as well, with also transition programs at the high school levels that we have.
Okay.
And I think those programs have certainly started to show their benefits towards students in the targeted populations of which they serve.
Because if you skip ahead to the math scores, grade 5, you have the same situation, but there also you see that the ELL is starting to trend up.
They're starting to develop some language, too.
That's what I understand. And that's especially evident if you skip over to the 5th grade science. Because there, everybody's trending up but one group, it appears. I mean, they're trending up from the year before, some significantly from the year before, but only one group seems to have dropped back, which is not the group.
The other thing that's hard about this is that these groups are vastly different size.
Yes.
So
Yep.
the group that is the one that isn't trending up has the fewest number of people in it.
Right, but it was
So,
earlier,
2 students can make your trend.
but it was commented earlier that the smaller class sizes were what was being used, so these populations then do reflect that as a strategy for getting the scores up. Which is, I've understood what Neil was saying, the community or the outreach into the community and the smaller groupings were making the difference, and you can follow it through with that particular strand of folks. I mean, that gives us some data to look at there.
And I'd also, smaller groupings, but I'd also say the targeted approach to instructional strategies focused on the associated standards that the students need to show their success over time.
And that's the same thing in 13, 14, instructional targeted focus with the general ed people mixing with the special ed people together. They put a major effort into literacy last year.
Right.
Paul, is that,
That doesn't.
Chris?
I just wanted to react to what you were just talking about. When I said that about intact groups, Nancy hit that in a different way, and it's the idea that those groups are different sizes, that some of them are small enough that a few kids can have a dramatic impact on the average. When I talked about intact groups, what I meant was, can we look at a group of kids who were second graders 2 years ago, third graders 1 year ago, and third graders this year who are the same kids, and look at the percentage of them that have been in our district all 3 years, and in fact, hopefully, a higher and higher percentage of them are meeting benchmarks each year. That's the kind of data that I was referring to when I meant intact group.
And Chris, if I may, we have an example to share with you relative to cohort data, and it's a 2-year
Right.
data set, but we could do it for 3 and 4 and 5, so.
I think that's much more illuminative to me than looking at different size groups, different numbers of kids, different, there's just too many ifs, ands, or buts about how those columns look to be able to draw a whole lot of conclusions from, in my mind.
And maybe this discussion will lead into what should be in the results policy as we talk about that further in a future board meeting.
Is that it, Chris?
Yep.
On the mention of cut scores, were the cut score changes factored in on this data or not? I mean, we've looked at data in the past where we factored in the cut score change, so we were comparing apples to apples.
Yes, yes. This is using the recalculated cut scores.
Okay, so that's factored in here. It would be interesting, from my perspective, to see the graphs with the 2 previous years in there, 8, 9, and 9, 10, because I think that would show the trend was going up, okay? And we have dipped, what I remember about the data. And in my mind, I just related to what happened to the economy and what we had to do with the budget. And the effect happened, it was a lag, and it happens. I mean, the dialogue when we were cutting was, we're doing good now, we're gonna do good for a while, but it's not gonna last. And we're gonna see this bump down, and it's gonna be a little more severe because of the change in testing. But we still have everything in place that allowed us to trend upwards in the first place, I would believe, and it's going to get stronger because the money's coming back. So, Nancy?
Something somebody said just made me wonder about, Salam said we have been transitioning to Common Core for 3 years, but we haven't been testing, we haven't changed the testing. Can that have an impact as well, that we're teaching to different standards, and we're teaching
Alignment.
more strategic thinking, that's not the word. Critical thinking, thank you.
And nonfiction. So we shifted a lot to nonfiction compared to what the Oregon English Language Arts standards call for. So the teaching, the content has changed slightly, the teaching has changed slightly, the language of the standards has changed significantly. So when students sit down to take the test, although it is the same content in some ways, the language is going to affect their performance, perhaps. So, yeah.
So it could
Lots of
be an
variables
issue.
that contribute to it, yeah.
Any other questions on elementary? Okay, we're good. Let's go ahead and go to middle school.
All right, let's talk about middle school students. First of all, it's the greatest level that you could possibly go to school because the kids have so much energy and excitement. In Salem-Keizer Public Schools, we have 11 comprehensive middle schools and 2 charter schools. Our largest school enrolls just over 1,000 students. We have a second that's nearly 1,000, and our smallest school enrolls 600 students. 5 of our 11 comprehensive schools are Title I schools, so the students attending these schools have a poverty rate that's 72% or higher. Last year, on average, across the middle schools, our poverty rate was 61%, which is slightly above the district average as a whole. So who are the wonderful students that we serve at the middle school level? We serve just over 9,100 students. Of those students, approximately 858 of them are talented and gifted students. Approximately 2,000 students are English language learners, and of those students, 50% are in the transition period, meaning they've exited the program. So when we look at the data a little bit later on, the transition students, the students who have exited out, are not counted in the subgroup, similar to elementary and high school. Approximately 1,500 of our students are identified as special education, so they could be being served on an individual education plan for speech, academic disabilities, as well as being served in our self-contained programs. And of all of our students, 78 students at the middle school level are identified as homeless. So I think that's important to recognize that we have some students with some challenges, and we want to make education a priority for them and support them in every way that we can. So we're going to start by looking at the reading data. And here what you'll see across reading, math, and science, in the last 3 years, you're going to see that we have remained pretty stagnant. You haven't seen an upward or really a downward trend. We spent quite a few years improving academic achievement, but over the last 3 difficult years, our student achievement has stayed pretty stable. The next sheet that you'll see of data, you'll see our achievement gap. So where Salem-Keizer Middle Schools is in reference to the state as a whole. So you'll see in 6th grade, the gap is the largest. We begin to close in 7th grade, and it gets much closer to closing the achievement gap with the rest of the state in 8th grade. Next, like elementary, we're going to take a look at each grade level. So here you see the ethnic groups identified, as well as special ed and our English language learners. And like Salam mentioned earlier, we have some of our students who may be in 2 or more categories. So you may have an English language learner who's also special ed, who may also be in an ethnic group. And what the data shows us that our students who are dual identified SPED and English language learners typically take anywhere from 7 to 9 years to exit the language proficiency, where on average it's 5 to 7 years. When we look at our 6th grade data and we monitor our English language learners at the beginning of the year to the end of the year, we exit approximately 44% of our 6th graders out of language development classes, meaning that through the work at the elementary level going into middle school, those students are able to master the language proficiency level at a level 5. So you see that increase at the 7th grade level when they start as 7th graders. By the end of the year, we're able to exit 60%. And then again, it moves down at 8th grade. But overall, at the middle school level, all 3 grade levels combined, we're exiting about 50% of our kids each year out of language development classes. So I heard a question earlier about how are we doing in relationship to the rest of the state. At the middle school level, when it comes to our English language learners compared to the rest of the state, at the 6th grade level, we're performing 3% higher than the rest of the English language learners across the state, 2% higher at the 7th grade level, and at the 8th grade level, we're still awaiting our 8th grade data. So our students, while it looks like we've made some gains from previous year, remember, these are only the kids who are in the program. This does not count our kids who have exited or who have been proficient in English. So that would obviously take our data up a little bit higher. Also, in reading, our special ed students at the middle school level, in 6th grade, we're actually 3% lower than the state, but then we see an upward trends in 7th and 8th grade, outperforming the rest of the state by 1% in 7th grade and 2% in 8th grade. So here's our 7th grade data. And again, we're outperforming in our SPED and English language learner group. And then our 8th grade.
And Melissa, we just don't have the ELL 13, 14, 8th grade reading data yet. Is that why there's no?
That's correct. It hasn't been calculated for districts across the state. So that's going to take us into middle school math. And I have to say that mathematics is our strongest academic program at the middle school level. We're really proud of the work that's been happening in mathematics. When you look at Common Core state standards, we have been focusing on math inquiry at the middle school and high school level. Students really work together in groups. They launch into a math assignment together. They collaborate. They have to explain their thinking. So this really is a bright spot for us. And while our data shows that achievement has not actually improved. When you look at how we're doing across the state, I think this is where you see how far Salem-Keizer has come in mathematics. By the time students leave us in 8th grade, we're 10% higher than the rest of the state, and I think that's really a pride point for us. You see that we're starting to make gains in 6th grade. It grows in 7th. We start bringing the state up. So we create the achievement gap in Oregon at the middle school level.
Nice. Well said.
Okay, so let's go into our demographics data. And as you see here, again, mathematics, we're doing well. We are, when you look at the subgroup data, our English language learners in Salem-Keizer at the 6th grade level are performing, meeting or exceeding 6% higher than the rest of the state. And our special ed students are 3% higher than the rest of the state.
Melissa, do you know where the Black and African American population is compared to the rest of the state? Do you have that data point too?
I don't have it on me. I have it on my computer in the office, but.
I still would like to see all these subgroups compared across the state.
We'll see if we can just add a bar and send it out.
Here we have math for 7th grade, and again, looking at our English language learners. Our English language learners in Salem-Keizer are performing 8% higher than the rest of the state. And in special education, we're 1% higher than the rest of the state. Oops, did I go the wrong direction? In 8th grade, our English language learners are 9% higher than the rest of the state averages, and in special education, we're 2% higher. And I think, Jim, you had asked earlier about how we're, or maybe Nancy, it was you who asked how we're doing compared to schools that are like us. So in mathematics, 11 out of 11 middle schools are outperforming their like comparison schools by quite a bit in middle school mathematics, and 1 out of 2 of our charter schools are. So when you look at schools with similar demographics, poverty rate, we are outperforming our comparison schools. So that brings us to science, and science, if you remember, is only tested in 5th grade and 8th grade. So it's hard to track how we do from year to year because so many years go by before we see the same group of kids. But in Salem-Keizer, we're just below the state average. And 9 out of our 11 middle schools are beating their comparison schools, and 1 out of 2 charter schools. So that brings us to our focus and what we are doing during this school year. As mentioned earlier, we are in our 2nd year implementing new standards in mathematics and reading. So last year we really worked on introducing new standards. What do they look like? What does it look like in the classroom? We're diving deeper into them this year in our professional development, really focusing on college and career readiness standards, because that's what Common Core really focuses on. Critical thinking, critically thinking, and then writing, and then speaking, really that collaboration with peers. We're also implementing a new program in our English language development classes, which serve our English language learners. It's called English 3D. So there's a lot more focus on language development, vocabulary, protocols for speaking. If you walk into classrooms, you'll see students engaging more actively with high levels of academic language than previously. So we're in year 1 implementing that across the middle schools. We piloted it last year in 1 middle school, and after that pilot, we've rolled it forward in all of our schools. We're also providing on-grade level access to all of our students. So we're focusing on pre-teaching for the kids who need to see the standards prior to seeing them in the mainstream classroom. We're doing a lot of reteaching. You heard Mira talk about the data teams at the elementary level. We're really looking at how we can intervene in the mainstream classrooms for students And then also for our tag students, the kids who get it right away, how can we extend learning and grow them, because that's what we're focused on, is growth for each and every student. Like elementary and high schools, we're also building capacity in our professional learning communities, really looking at each standard, identifying the skills that students need to master those, developing common formative assessments that the teachers can then look at the data together and plan interventions or extensions if the students already have it, but really focusing on each and every single student. We're also have expanded our accelerated classes in mathematics to 8th grade this year. So we started last year with 7th grade accelerated math and have moved into accelerated 8 math this year. So that's what middle schools will be working on this year.
Did you want to add anything before? Okay, questions? Nancy?
I just got lost when you talked about pre-teaching. What did that mean?
So let's say you're a special education student who is served in a learning resource center. You may go to the learning resource center to see some standards that are coming up in your math class. So maybe you're looking at multiplying fractions. You see those standards delivered in a smaller setting, small group. The teacher's able to intervene in a one-on-one maybe, or maybe with a group of students. So you see the standards there ahead of time. And then when you're in your on-grade level 6th grade math class, you get access to those standards again. So the kids who really need the pre-teaching or the front loading, they get a double dose of instruction so that they can be successful.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for middle school? Oh, and Melissa, I want to bring up the graph you had where it shows us exceeding the state, right?
Oh, you want to see math?
Yeah, on math.
Wants to
yeah.
see the achievement gap.
Let's leave it
right?
there for a while.
But when you have a big pride point like this, you want to do that. When I saw that graph and all the other previous graphs of that design showed the slopes exactly the same and the break the same, and those type of graphs are telling me that the state, there's a common problem in the state. And I'm going to go back to money and the changes we're making in the standards is a common problem every district's facing. So we're tracking with every district because of this common problem. But here we're exceeding the districts because we do have something going on that's allowing us to exceed what everybody else is doing. The reading scores in middle school we track the same way as the state, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we, hopefully with it throughout the state, there's other districts who may have some reading strategies that show their slope advancing like this, that we could garner and other districts could garner from them. So anyway, the way the graphs are lined out is pretty interesting to me. So. But I'm a food scientist and I look at numbers all the time.
We're just gonna, it's stalled out at that
Yeah.
slide. We're stopped, frozen.
Leave it there
Yeah.
a little.
So we'll go on. Oh, Chris, you got
I just have a clarification question, and that is that as I was sitting and watching those disaggregated data, it sort of dawned on me to go back and look at the ELL along with the Hispanic Latino and with the Pacific Islander graphs, basically because of what you've been saying about how students who have exited the ELL program no longer show up in that ELL line. So if in fact our kids that have exited the ELL program are dragging down some group, you would expect to see that probably in one of those two lines. Is that accurate?
Well, you're going to have to wait until the end because we have some slides for you just that will speak to that.
I was going to say, on most of the graphs, not all, but most of the graphs, those two that I just mentioned, their bars are as tall as everybody else's bars. And so it would appear that they are not dragging down their subgroups.
And year after year, if you look at our data, our students who have been in program and have successfully exited are our highest performing subgroup that we have. They outperform any other subgroup, including the white subgroup.
And yet the state doesn't include them as a subgroup.
Correct.
So don't look ahead, Chris, because we're going to get an answer to
No,
your
I
question.
I was looking at those bars and asking,
Makes
the one
sense.
that really hit me was the science one where the ELL thing is this little tiny thing. So I went back over and looked at where they stand, and language is an issue for science. Having been a science teacher, I can attest to that, and they are low. But I went back further and looked at others, and it's not always the case. So.
Okay, seeing no other questions. Kelly, high school.
My turn to talk about high schools. Very excited about moving forward with not only the conversation about what high schools are accomplishing, but I really want to make sure that we understand that in the K-12 progression, there are a lot of pride points that we can share for students who go through Salem-Keizer's schools. And every time there's a graduation, it's a K-12 effort. It's not just a high school effort. And as our graduation rate rises, that's the culminating accomplishment of several educators who have worked with our students, many of them from the start of kindergarten all the way through the senior year. Our high schools have, we have 6 comprehensive high schools ranging in size from 1,600 to 2,200 students. We have an early college high school on the campus of Chemeketa Community College with a blended class model where some of your classes are high school and some of your classes you're taking along with college students. And we also have one alternative high school, Roberts High School, which is comprised of several interventions that are designed to help students get around the barriers that may be in place in their lives so that they can also successfully achieve their graduation. 2 of our large comprehensive high schools are identified as Title I. We have nearly 12,100 students in grades 9 through 12. 1,586 of those students are in special education. 1,491 are identified as talented and gifted. Fewer than 500 ELL students, which brings us back to Melissa's comment that you remember that she said there were 2,000 and that each year 50% of the students were successfully exited out of their grade. So we continue to serve students, and some of them are newcomers, and others are long-term English learners. But oftentimes, if you're a long-term English learner and still in the program by the time you're in high school, there are multiple factors going on for you. 99 of our students are listed as homeless. 92 are enrolled in the Teen Parent Program, and we have 61 students currently enrolled in the Downtown Learning Center who are working towards their GED and will test to attain their GED. I was waiting for the slide to change, and then I realized I had the pointer in my own hand. So here is how we've been trending for the last 2 years. In general, we are enjoying steady progress in reading and in math, where we have either met or exceeded the state averages in these areas. And we also have opportunities to have more sustained growth in writing and science, where our scores have hovered around the 60% line or lower in recent years. And then here's how we compare to the rest of the state. And you can see that we were 4% ahead in math and holding steady with the state average in reading. And we were 4% behind in writing and science last year. So while our overall reading scores matched the state average, you will see that our 2 largest subpopulations, Hispanic and white, have made some gains, and so has special education. And we had some bright spots at early college high school, McKay and McNary, each of which rose 3 to 4% in reading.
Kelly, is this one grade in high school or several grades when you do?
The Oaks testing typically is administered at the 11th grade. However, there are several students who begin their testing in 10th grade, and once they meet, then that score is banked, but they are tested, the data is collected on a particular cohort. So this data reflects all of last year's juniors.
Okay, thank you.
And then as we saw before, our math scores were 4% higher than the state average by 4%. And you can see how we did within our subgroups. A couple of bright spots, early college high school and Roberts each had gains of 9% last year, which was exciting. Our science scores slipped a little bit by 2% last year, which is borne out in the data that you see here. We are just now adapting to some new standards, the next generation science standards. Those will be implemented in the next couple of years. Also worth noting, students are required to meet essential skills requirements for graduation in math, reading, and writing. Science is not a requirement, so I'm constantly wondering how students are doing with their science test regarding their own personal motivation to do their very best on their tests or not, knowing that it's not going to apply towards their diploma. But that's a statewide issue, and so we're not far from the state average, but we're below it, and I would love to see that change. I would want to mention that early college high school had a gain of 17% last year. And then writing increased slightly overall, but not for all subgroups. We had some increases at South and at Roberts. And writing is something that we are engaged in every single classroom in our high schools, in all of our secondary schools, in terms of going across all content areas, encouraging teachers to find meaningful and authentic writing strategies that they can use in their classes that match with their content areas. And I would say that if you were to look at any particular area that's included in state testing, writing tends to be the one that is the most volatile from year to year. And so as we think about the things that we hope will move the dial and we'll continue to see more growth, we'd like to see that we include and continue using intervention and workshop classes for the students who need additional support. This is designed to help them keep pace with their required classes in math and reading especially, but also writing. We also want to see that we continue our use of professional development that is job embedded for our teachers. It's extremely important that they have access to coaches and to content area professional development and collaboration with each other. These inputs for professional development have typically involved a deep focus on critical thinking through reading, writing, and speaking. That is our focus. We also want to encourage the continued growth and development of our professional learning communities and data teams. Much like Melissa described, what they're doing is coming together in like content groups to do some instructional planning together, to do a common formative assessment where everybody can bring back similar data and compare how things went, and then ask some of the deep questions around what do we need to do to reteach students and then to pre-teach in the next unit. We're also engaged in some of our schools in co-teaching. That's that model that you heard about before where the special ed teacher and the general ed teacher are collaborating and working in one classroom together with the idea that that can increase access to general ed content for students. We also have AVID classes that help students realize their college dreams, and they're introduced to all sorts of strategies that help keep them engaged in really high-level classes. And I'm noticing that some of the bright spots that we found at Early College High School may be related to the fact that Early College High School has embraced AVID strategies school-wide, whether you're in an AVID class or not. And then finally, we are really stressing the importance of taking college-level classes, whether it's College Credit Now or the Willamette Promise, IB, AP. We want to see students take at least one rigorous class every year, and we're working to increase enrollment in our high schools in one or more of these classes for each student.
Okay. Questions for Kelly around the high school results? I don't see anybody wanting to ask any questions. Okay. Thank you,
Doesn't
Kelly.
seem fair that we didn't ask as many questions. ask all those hard questions to the elementary.
I know.
Well, I would assume that they take some of the questions that we asked and replicate them into the same level areas as we moved across, so
Yep.
I didn't feel a need to repeat them.
All right, you're on the record now, Jeff.
That's right. They knew they had the hardest job.
Well, you put them first.
Yep.
So the next is the student achievement cohort data.
Right. So I'm going to do this section, and just to preface it by a couple of comments, what we wanted to demonstrate here is how we move from looking at averages to specific student groups and how we disaggregate that data and do a deep dive relative to their performance. We also wanted to illustrate that we pay attention to growth as much as we do achievement. So the whole purpose of looking at cohort data is to really measure students' progress, the same group of students as they move from one year to another. So we want to know, how did third graders do in fourth grade? How did seventh graders do in eighth grade, et cetera? So we wanted to highlight a couple of things. Our focus is on our Hispanic student population, since 39% of our students are Hispanic.
Could I ask you just a quick question?
Yes.
You say cohort, same students, grade to grade. Are we talking intact, or are we talking about all kids? And I mean, kids that move in, are they part of the group?
The intact.
Yes. The intact.
Okay, so in other words, it's not an intact group, but it is a cohort. It is a grade
Right.
level.
What I'm going to talk about is we have the all students, so we treat all third graders as a cohort moving to fourth grade, seventh graders as a cohort moving to eighth grade, and then we disaggregate that by subgroups. So we're going to look at the Hispanic group as well as the all.
But you don't
students.
take into consideration if they just moved in or moved.
Yes, how do you treat that?
It has to be.
Not on these
the-
slides,
It
yeah.
has to be the intact group. So to go from cohort to cohort, it has to be
Yeah.
the same kids.
Okay, so, so kids that have moved in are not part of this data?
Correct.
No.
That's the kind of data I like.
At the state level, that distinction is not made, however, because all third graders are.
All third graders, yeah.
So, but for us, we would do that, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so very quickly, so this is the all students cohort data in reading. And as you notice, you know, if we were to go back and look at the other slides, you would see consistent patterns here. So students do really well as they transition from third to fourth. The fourth students struggle in fifth grade because that is a transition year. The content gets more rigorous, if you will. The fifth to sixth is a transition year, and we see a pattern where students actually struggle a little bit in that first transition year from fifth to sixth or eighth to ninth, and then their performance increases, and it stays fairly consistent until they transition into high school. But by the end of high school, we see a spike in performance. And that's as a result of language development for English language learners, content mastery and proficiency, and I think just persistence throughout the grades in our system. So if we look at our third grade students, you will find that the pattern is consistent to the data that the level director has just shared with you. If we look at math, it's also a similar pattern. Our students progress, their performance in math increases as they advance through our system, and we see significant gains at the high school level. Okay. So again, we pay attention to growth. Are students making adequate growth from year to year? And at the end of their school experience with us in high school, have they made adequate growth to prepare them to graduate? Are they college and career ready? And you're going to hear about that from Neil here in just a little bit. What we also wanted to do is show you an example of how we disaggregate this data. And you have two groups here. You have our Hispanic student population that are ELL, those students that have been identified as English language learners. And then we have the overall Hispanic population that are not ELL, meaning that they are proficient in English or they opted not to be a part of the ELL program, and students have that option. So as you look at that, you will find also growth, especially in our Hispanic English-speaking population. And this demonstrates the point that the more proficient you are in English, the more likely you are to be successful on state assessments and in school. So you see the trend. The positive thing here and the point of celebration is that we're really seeing growth on everybody's part. We do see a dip in 5th grade, and that's consistent with all state-level data as well, but then we see growth as they move through our system.
And I want to just point out that the dark green graph is our Hispanic group, including the ELL
Yes.
kids.
But again, the third grade bar represents far more kids than the 11th grade bar.
Correct.
That is correct, yep. Rick, I think Nancy had a question.
Oh, sorry, Nancy.
So the dark green bar is everyone who's Hispanic that ever had ELL.
And it's currently ELL. It's all of that Hispanic subgroup.
And
In program now,
in program now.
or last year.
And the light green group are people who are not in ELL now, or people who have never been in ELL?
That is correct. They are Hispanic, but they may be proficient in English or may have opted not to be in a program, and parents have that choice.
So that, my question wasn't either
Or exit,
or, and you
yes.
said the answer was yes, so that confused me. So the light green are Hispanics who never have had ELL.
Or may have exited an ELL program. That's
Okay.
why I say they're
Or may have
proficient in
exited.
English.
Exited, okay.
Yeah, so they're
They're
proficient.
just not in it now.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
We took out the ELL group.
Yeah.
They're Hispanic without ELL services.
Today.
So they may have been proficient already and did not need services. They may have completed a program and exited, and they're proficient, or they may have declined services. So those typically are the three categories, right, Melissa?
Yes.
All right. So the good news is that we're seeing an upward trend. We're seeing growth on the part of all of those students. Again, we're trying to show you how we disaggregate the data and how we look at different subgroups and their performance over time. PLCs, for example, use this kind of data to do the analysis relative to the interventions that they need to provide to students. So again, example of disaggregating data of students that have been previously ELL. So those are students that have exited, that have become proficient in English. And the good news is the overall performance of those students compared to their peer white students is really remarkable. So the blue is the white student population in our district. The brown, I guess, is the previous, those ELL students that have exited. And as you can see, their performance really mirrors the performance of our white students, except in writing. But we know linguistically that continues to be a struggle for English language learners for a long, long time. So even if they're proficient in English, writing is a challenging area for all students. So the good news here is that we are seeing similar trends in terms of performance, but also we're closing the achievement gap.
How old are our oldest kids who have had consistent lit squared?
We have some schools that have program models that go up to 5th grade. Is that what you're talking, that where the grade ends or the
No.
age?
How old, at
When
what
did it
grade
start?
are the
Oh.
students who have had it at all at the oldest?
So how many years have we had Lit Squared?
We've had it since 2009. So,
Going on 5 years.
5 years. So if
So-
somebody started with us at age 5 in 1st grade, if we had it K-5 at that school, they would be 11, 12 years old today.
Yeah.
That
They'd
they're
be
sixth
in-
Starting
graders.
to impact the middle school.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
It seems to me it's, when I read those papers on the outside of the wall at
The Chavez.
Chavez, that writing, those kids are gonna bump those bars significantly.
Yep, yep. You're absolutely right, Nancy. We see evidence of that at the middle school level. Okay, so,
Salam,
yes,
before you
sir.
leave this slide, so in reading and math, you could say with the student population of ELL, students that have transitioned out of ELL,
Yes.
there is no achievement gap between them and the white population.
I would say that is
I
correct.
mean, 1% is a gap, yeah, I agree.
Absolutely, but it's statistically, it's insignificant.
Okay, thank you.
So we could argue that we've actually closed the achievement gap. That's an absolutely accurate observation. Okay. So if we look at our white reading scores in grade 11, our white students compared to Hispanic students that are not ELL, and again, they're not ELL because they didn't need it, they've exited or they've declined. You also see a positive upward trend in performance. So the Hispanic without ELL, or the green bar, we go from 84 in 11-12 to 86 in 12-13, and 88% achieving the reading score, the reading cut score in 13-14. So you see upward progression. And again, you could argue that we're closing the achievement gap for those students as well. Okay, and those are really great points of celebration.
Before you leave this slide,
Okay.
I'd like to, I know we don't probably have the data to present that way, but I'd like to see that type of chart from 2005, 6, 7 to see, because I'm sure that difference was greater.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure we had the data carved out that way back then as far as the kids that have transitioned out. So anyway,
Yep.
I guess I should be closer to the mic.
So the next slide also reflects the same pattern, but it's in mathematics in grade 11. And you can see that our Hispanic students that are non-ELL, that are proficient in English, are growing and closing the gap between them and our white students.
Those are the exact same numbers, aren't they?
Yes.
Or at least the gap is identical.
Yep.
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 5, 4, 3.
Yep. So, let's see. Before we transition to student achievement and graduation, do you have any questions for me relative to the cohort data? Hoping it answered some of the questions that you raised earlier about how do students compare to themselves as they progress through our system.
So I have overall questions. You want me to hold those until after you finish our student achievement stuff before we get into achievement compact?
Let's do that if it's.
Okay, if they're overall, yep.
Yeah, they're overall on achievement and what we can do, so.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I'll run the clicker for you.
Okay.
Ready?
This is my favorite slide. What this reflects is some really heavy lifting on the parts of people who have found ways to create new on-ramps back into school for kids who had dropped out. Had we seen data from any year prior to 2007-8, we would have noticed a dropout rate at or above 7%. It was a stubborn statistic that just didn't seem to move from year to year. But we started doing some things differently in 2008-9 with the introduction of some graduation coaches. Back then we called them Dropout Recovery CSOCs, but their title changed a couple years after that. And you'll notice a dramatic shift. The numbers were, in 2007-8 we had 888 dropouts, and in 2008-9 we had 555. And so that was a pretty dramatic change all in 1 year. But we continued to make progress and got some help from some additional funding through the High School Graduation Initiative. That's that federal grant that we've had for the last 4 years. We're in our 5th and final year of this grant. And it's helping to fund the positions that you see in the little text box and the programs. Graduation coaches, and these are the people who literally look at our data of the names of the students who have dropped out of school for one reason or another. And they hunt down the phone number or the address, and they go and knock on doors and speak in English or in Spanish and develop a relationship with this student and with parents and get the students re-enrolled in a school. Sophomore Connections is a program that we have at the Roberts Annex, and it brings in students who didn't do so well their freshman year. Maybe they didn't earn any credits towards graduation. Unfortunately, we have some students that find themselves in that situation. And so we actively recruit them into the Sophomore Connections program. It's an option. They don't have to do it, but if they want to, we can probably get them close to being back on track with credits towards graduation. Childcare, that's a big deal for a teen mom who may not have any other options as to whether or not she even can go back to school or not. And so by providing childcare and a safe place for the baby as well as the mom, we reduce the dropout by 1 every time we can do that. And summer transition program, I think you heard Neil mention that there's a program that we have for students as they transition from middle to high school. It's sort of an academic boot camp, helping students understand and beef up their academic skills right before the school year begins for their freshman year. Very, very effective program. And then finally, our Oregon College Mentors. This is something that we do in partnership with the Salem-Keizer Education Foundation, as well as the Ralph Hull Foundation. And basically what we're able to do is bring in college students who mentor our students, sometimes during the school day, but mostly after the school day. And it can be everything from homework help to some activities that engage the students and give them something meaningful to look forward to after the school day is over.
Is that it on that, Kelly? Questions?
Sure.
Chris and then.
I just noticed that last year wasn't on there yet. Is that?
Correct. It takes a while for the state to refine the data on dropouts and graduation rates, and we typically don't see that report until January or February after that academic year.
Did I understand you to say that the sophomore connections, the student could basically earn 2 years of credits in 1 year?
Through proficiency, students are able to catch up on their cores. We can't give them cores and electives. And so depending on how aggressively the student wants to gain those credits, they can get back up to being ready for a junior level class by the end of that one academic year.
Ellie, I seem to remember a term in a report last year sometime about literacy center. Is that Sophomore Connections? Is that
Yeah, the Sophomore Connections program is in the same building as the Literacy Center.
But the Literacy Center works with kids who have left but need help to come back in.
Right. It's another program inside the Roberts Annex. And the Literacy Center supports students whose literacy skills may be so low, so below high school level, that they're not going to find success in any particular program until they address that issue. And so we have a couple of teachers who assist students with that.
Any other questions of Kelly? Okay, next topic.
Okay, and our graduation rates. I get to talk about
you're
that
not
for a
done.
second
I'm
too.
Yeah, one more
Yeah.
quick slide.
Again, we're making progress. In a large district, even a 1% gain represents a big achievement. And so the fact that even in difficult resource times that we're making this progress, this is a K-12 accomplishment. And I really want to make sure that we're crediting our elementary and middle schools as much as our high schools in this. This is a big effort. And as graduation requirements have become much more stringent, we've begun to be much more creative. For the last 3 years, we've held a summer graduation for students who didn't quite get there in June, but with a little bit more of an oomph in the summertime, they walk. And they are part of the class of 2014, just like everybody else, just a different date of graduation. That's a big pride point for us, and I don't think a lot of districts do that. So I'm proud of the work.
Do I read the graph right that 12% of our kids are graduating in their 5th year?
Yes. So imagine that we recovered a student who dropped out. They're almost always credit deficient, and it's almost impossible to come back after having dropped out and graduate on time. It's possible, but it's really challenging. So a number of our students need that additional time in a 5th year. Also, our students in early college, high school, nearly all of them go through a 5-year model rather than 4, so that they can blend some of their college classes in there with their diploma.
Chris, I heard your question to be that the difference between those two is 12% basically. So you think the cohort group, 5-year cohort group is 12% of the total?
No, what I was just looking at is the 72 to 84%, that if you look at a group after 5 years, 84% have graduated, and if you look at them after 4 years, 72% has. So I was just saying it seems pretty consistent on there. Around 12% of our kids are graduating in their 5th year. And Personally, I think that's great, but I have no problem.
And of course, these numbers don't reflect the students who earn a GED, but many of them have college plans or career plans immediately after earning the GED.
Nancy? Oh, you look like you had your hand up. Did you?
I did have my hand up, and I had a really, really good question. but then
My
you brought
colleague
the
to my right
GED.
reminded me that this also doesn't reflect the modified diploma. So a student who may have a disability, but met all the graduation requirements, doesn't get to be included in this data yet. But this academic year, they will, and we're excited about that.
So we're gonna at the end of this academic year, have something that gives all completers, that will include the GEDs and include, so that we're looking really at the success rate of all types of completion?
It won't, unfortunately, include GEDs, but it will include all diploma types.
Do you have any idea what that percentage is roughly?
Of other diplomas or GEDs?
Other diplomas. Having done the graduation where we did all the GEDs, I know there's a lot of those too.
Yeah, I want to get that statistic right for you, so I think I'd like a day or two.
Okay. I was just wondering, where does that leave us overall? I was going to add it to 84 in my head.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
remembered my question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Nancy.
So, how many of these kids in the 5-year cohort need the whole year? Or how many of them just need a semester?
Yeah, actually, about half only need a half of a year, and some students need a full year, and actually some students need more than 5 years to finish. We try to stay committed to them as long as their age allows us to, and so we have some students even in a 6th year who we'll try to help if we can.
Any more questions with Kelly?
If I may just add something that
Please,
Kelly
Lon.
has touched on. So the 5th-year cohort also includes our early college, high school students, right, Kelly?
Yes.
Those students that opt to stay another year and get college credit while in high school. And the early college, high school model is a middle college concept that allows for that. So, and many of those students are what we categorize as high potential, low opportunity. Many of them are first-generation high school completers that we're affording them the opportunity to get college credit while in high school and put them on a path to enroll in college and complete. So I just wanted to make sure that we highlight early college, high school, because it's a great learning model and it's a great opportunity model that we have in our district and is the envy of many districts around the state. So, and it's based on a national concept.
Thanks, Lon. So on to the achievement compact, I believe, right?
Do you want to wait and ask questions after that piece?
Sure, if you want to talk about a document that apparently doesn't matter because Portland's not doing theirs, go ahead.
Okay, you just
Yeah, I
want
was
to go
wondering about
quick,
that
quick.
too.
Salam would be okay to go quick through that.
Just do click, click, and call it done.
Portland's not doing that?
Well, the great news about the Achievement Compact is that it represents everything that you've heard this evening. So when the Achievement Compact was made a requirement, it wasn't really a big deal to us because we had a planning process, we had a mechanism for setting goals for the district and measuring those goals through the board's results policy. So we were very well positioned to be able to gather this data, organize it in a fashion that the state wants it, and be able to track our progress just like we normally do. So the Achievement Compact really represents all of these data points that you just heard about. So instead of spending a lot of time on that, I just want to touch on a couple of things, and that's why we have only 2 slides. The first one is the categories that we have to respond to in the Achievement Compact. So college and career readiness, and it's the graduation rate, the 4- and 5-year graduation rate, the number of students that have taken 3+ college credit courses, the percentage of students that have enrolled in a post-secondary institution. Some of this data we generate, some of it is generated to us by the state. The good news about this, in my opinion, is that we can use this to compare ourselves to other districts that are similar to us. And we also use it as a leverage point to say, especially when you move into the progression category, that these indicators are really, really important. Attendance is important. Ensuring that ninth graders have at least 6 credits by the end of, 6 credits by the end of ninth grade is important. Absenteeism is a contributing factor to falling behind and not completing schools and dropping out. So it just allows us as a district an opportunity to focus on all of these things in a very consistent and deliberate manner. Melissa, for example, tracks middle school attendance at every grade. She pushes that information out to her principal to say, where are you on attendance? We have built a capacity through our data warehouse to be able to grab that information, track it, and push it out. So the equity piece is the number of schools, the number of priority and focus schools and top schools that we have. The local priority is an option that we were given by the state to identify some data points that we want to celebrate as a community. And we have chosen to focus on the exited ELL students and their performance in reading, writing, and math. So that's something that we chose to do. So the key indicators that I want to touch on fairly quickly that are important is the kindergarten assessment. And what I want to talk about, instead of going over the data with you, is to tell you what we're doing about that in addition to what you just heard. So the kindergarten assessment, you heard the challenge, 67% of our students come not ready for school. So we introduced several preschools last year, and we believe that's going to make a huge difference for those students to catch them up and have them ready to enroll in kindergarten. And Christy talked about that as well. The ninth grade credits earned, we have a tracking system, we have a watch list, we pay attention to those students that are not earning those credits. Kelly and Melissa talked about the interventions, whether it's a pre-teaching model or a intervention class. What do we call them again, Kelly?
Co-teaching. Co-teaching.
Workshop.
A workshop model, or an actual class like a math lab or a reading lab or a writing lab that the student goes to catch up, and then they come back to their regular class. The college credit in high school, we are pleased that the state changed their definition in that. Now it's students participating in college credit bearing courses, but not necessarily getting the credit, because some students just choose not to pay the transcripting fee for the credit. So with this, we can count AP and IB without the student taking the test and passing the test. So it gives us even a greater opportunity to get all of our students enrolled in college credit-bearing courses to demonstrate to them that they are college-ready and prepared to engage in more rigorous, more demanding courses. And Kelly talked about the partnership with Shemeketa through the College Credit Now program, Willamette Promise Now. We have also articulation agreements with Western, Portland Community College, Lane Glen Benton Community College, and Rogue Community College. So we work really hard to afford students opportunities to earn credit college credit while in high school. Attendance, something we pay a lot of attention to. Christy has launched a task force with the Keizer schools relative to attendance, middle school specifically. And again, it's just trying to draw attention to the importance of these variables and how they affect learning and achievement. Closing the achievement gap, the wonderful thing about the Achievement Compact, no matter how much we love it or lament it, is that it puts us on a very aggressive track to close the achievement gap. So the targets that you see before you on this sheet are a lot more aggressive. I think, do we have that, Christy? Okay. So you don't have the subgroup data here, so let me just describe it to you. So if 70% of our students, all of the all-student population has met the reading benchmark, and only 50% of our Hispanics has met the reading benchmark, the growth target is going to be enormously different between the two. So if we say our growth target is 10% of the non-met, so for the overall population, it'll be 73. The goal for the following year will be 73%. So it's 3%. For the Hispanic population, the growth target will be 5%, 5 percentage points. So it does actually force us to get more aggressive relative to closing the achievement gap, providing the appropriate supports and the interventions to help our neediest students catch up and be successful. So that's one of the positive outcomes of the Achievement Compact. But fortunately, we have a mechanism in place to do this, and it's not really a hardship on us. It's also allowed us to have some really deliberate conversations regarding achievement with our associations and different stakeholders, and that's a positive thing as well. And I think with that, I'm going to stop and see if you have any questions.
Questions?
Ready, Jim?
Sure.
Okay.
So I was only somewhat facetious about the Achievement Compact, and I say that because we had done a whole bunch of work already towards this. But the unfortunate thing about the Achievement Compact is it doesn't just focus on your key indicators of student success. It goes way into more fields that I don't think we need to be focusing on. And I would add one to your list here, which is our third grade reading scores. Those are the ones that they've talked about limiting the Achievement Compact to, but the OEIB just won't do it. And I think that's unfortunate for other districts in the state. I think we've been very well situated in this district to fulfill and meet our Achievement Compacts. But I would hope that the OEIB would seriously listen to the discussions that are going on around the state about limiting it to the real student success numbers that they need to take a look at. So my overall questions that I had just real quickly was, Christy, you mentioned that you were going to come back to the board with curriculum purchases. Are you looking at all levels or just at the elementary level?
Yeah, my biggest concerns right now are at the elementary level.
Okay.
I think we have them at all levels, but if we look at where the greatest achievement need is, I think we need to do some digging and focus at that
Okay.
level.
The second one is looking at our resorts policy as it's currently written. Have you and board leadership discussed about revisiting that and restructuring that in light of our smarter balanced assessments coming on board so that we can really put those in line with what we're going to see coming down the road?
We have talked about it in terms of, we think that's our next work session.
Okay. And
That's
finally,
as far as we've gotten.
I don't see Mike Wolf in the room, so I'm okay saying this. As at least for one school board member, I need to know what resources you need. And I'm happy to go into our contingency fund to assure the stuff that we're doing that has been successful, that Kelly talks about with our dropout rate and our grad rate. And we want to make sure that those programs are sustainable. And if you say we're at the end of our grant, how are we going to keep those graduation coaches? Because I don't see a whole bunch of new resources coming from the state. And I know we're not sitting on a huge contingency fund, but I got to tell you, at least for one school board member, I'm willing to spend the resources on programs and services for boys and girls that have shown proven results with boys and girls. I want to make sure that what we've done at McKay, we continue to sustain at McKay and replicate in our other 5 comprehensive schools. And what we've done at middle schools, I want to make sure we have the ability to do that. So I want to make sure that you, at least from my vantage point, have the freedom to come to us and say, we know this is working. We need to have the resources in order to do that. And I think that's the job of this board, to provide the resources for programs and services that are proven to work, to make them sustainable and keep them long-term.
One of the reasons I had Kelly put that exact sequence of things on that slide related to dropout rate was because we know we know this is why the dropout rate has been reduced, and we also know that we're going to have a gap in resources with the grant fund. So I think it's really important for you to push back with me on the budget message if we have some gaps in where you've really seen where we have results. The elementary resources, I think that's going to be an interesting one to study. And what I'm hoping is that some of our focus on our focus schools will yield us some points of here's how we know we can move these elementary schools a little further along and what we need to do that. And if you think about where we end up in 11th grade, if we could boost the achievement in our elementary schools, think where we would be in 11th grade.
I guess my point is I don't want to spend our contingency down to zero. That's a bad business model.
Yes.
But we have a contingency fund for a particular reason. And if we have additional resources, I think it's a disservice to our kids who are in our system today to hold that money into future years. I think we need to take those dollars and target them into programs we know that work and drive the data that we've seen tonight that can replicate programs, whether it's ELL at the elementary level, at our dropout rate. We need to assure that we're providing, as a board, the resources to you as the staff to take those programs to the next level. And I'm willing to look at dropping down our contingency fund to do that if we need to do it, because it's not serving kids in the system today to hold that money for kids who aren't currently in our system. And we've got to take care of this today.
That was my summary statement, so.
Chris?
I spent some more time looking at the results policy, thinking about just what Jim alluded to, and that is the effect of Smarter Balanced on this thing, because the way this is written currently, if New York is any indicator, and they went ahead of Park and Smarter Balanced and wrote their own Common Core tests and started them last year, and are nobody is saying that they are significantly different than what Park and Smarter Balanced have come up with in terms of what we're going to go. And this is everything I'm saying is sort of this dark thing out there in the future, because we have no idea what Smarter Balanced is really going to measure. But all that being said, New York had a 30% drop in basically every test that they gave. So 30% fewer students are passing their tests now under Common Core than did before. So the questions come up, is Common Core the right thing, and a lot of other kinds of questions. But I'm not really as concerned about that as I am about that this state has a 40-40-20 goal. And I still have a question about Oaks tests. If students passed Oaks tests, are they ready for college, four-year college? Are they ready for technical school? Are they ready to graduate and go to work? Same questions come up with Smarter Balanced. I think right now we are using a very blunt instrument to try to help us understand whether our kids are ready to go on in a 40-40-20 world. And I would love to see this board have a discussion about what we just saw, because what we just saw was these first slides that made it look like, oh man, everything's really bad. We're going to have to write the superintendent a really bad evaluation this year because all of our Oaks tests are going down, in elementary school at least. And according to the way that results policy is written, that's what we would have to do. And then we went on and we saw a whole bunch of other data that sort of dug down into it a little bit and started to show that things are not all that bleak. Things are going up. Things are getting better. They're still not as good as we want them to be. The question I would have is, how can we write a set of results policy that allows us to be able to every year look at where we stand in terms of having 40% of our kids ready to go on to college, 40% of our kids ready to go on to technical school, and 20% of them ready to go to work. And actually have a results policy where we allow the district to tell us these are the measures that we think are going to tell you that, and have us rewrite that results policy in light of the most important question right now, which is how do we get our kids ready for college, how do we get them ready for technical school, and how do we get them ready for work. And I think that the Common Core's moving us in the right direction if it does what it says it's going to do. Is it going to give us all the data we need to answer that question? I don't think so. I think we need to let the district say to us, here are the things we'd be looking at. I think they're looking at them. I think what we just saw and what Salem has talked to us about the college and career ready work that they're doing, they're already looking at them. Why don't we have those in our results policy? So I would just like to encourage us at our next meeting or our next couple meetings to have a more nuanced discussion about what does it mean to be successful as a school district than just simply saying our Oaks tests are going to go up every year.
Any other questions, discussion? Nancy?
Are we going to still do this, the last part of this?
Yeah.
We are, if you guys are up for keeping going.
I have questions about that, but we haven't heard.
Okay,
it
hold
yet.
that question then. Any other questions on what we covered so far? Okay.
Do you want to do a 5-minute break, or are you guys good to go?
Good to go.
Good
Good to go, it looks like.
Okay. Neil, congratulations, last.
I'm up.
You're
I'm
but not
last.
least.
Thank you. So over the last hour and a bit, we've talked a lot and heard a lot about the successes that our school district and our students have seen over time. And I think that really speaks to what I'm going to be talking about tonight is our strategic plan, goal area, focus area number 2. Our vision in our Salem-Keizer School District, K-12, is that all students graduate and are prepared for successful life. Chris, you just spoke about the 40-40-20 goal within our state, that 40% of our adult Oregonians will have earned a bachelor's degree or higher, 40% will earn an associate's degree or post-secondary credential, and 20% will at least have a high school diploma or its equivalent. Both of these visions are anchored in our ability to ensure that students successfully meet our state standards. That's what they're measured about. That's what our students are aiming for, and that's what our teachers are teaching towards. Strategic plan number 2 really speaks to this because it speaks about preparing all students for college and career in 3 areas. 1, continuing the implementation of the Common Core state standards. 2, continuing the implementation of the Smarter Balanced Assessment. And 3, continuing the K-12 literacy model across all content areas, including the program model for English language acquisition. So I'm going to be speaking about each one of these 3 areas in an overarching aspect. And then I also have a handout for you at the close that will give you a good look at what Smarter Balanced Assessment questions look like, not only in the multiple choice category, but also in the performance tasks in reading and in math at each one of the grade levels.
That'll include career technical?
Excuse me?
It'll include career technical as well?
The SBAC assessment?
Yeah.
The SBAC assessment right now only is measuring reading and math. In the science, we'll maintain with OAKS, and then there'll be a writing component, but that'll be an essential skills work sample aspect.
Okay.
Yep. So you might be, and I believe you are, familiar with this framework. This is the College and Career Readiness Framework that was developed last year through committee work within our school district. There are 4 major categories within this framework. Hard to see up there. Hopefully you can see it on your handout. But these 4 categories are key cognitive strategies. That's the top left-hand corner. Key content knowledge. That's the top right-hand corner. Key learning skills and techniques. That's the bottom right-hand corner. And then key transition knowledge and skills. That's the bottom left-hand corner. Around the edges speak to the overarching themes or how we're going to get to accomplish that. And each one of these areas or categories is addressed through our standards and through our instruction towards the Common Core, specifically either content area or instruction or methodology. An update from our last report. Obviously, I did not give the last report because I'm new in my position, but throughout this process, I have seen in my new role the transition in the work that we have done since then to now in addressing these 3 areas of strategic plan number 2. First and foremost, implementation of the Common Core state standards. We have been providing professional development for our teachers and administrators that is focused on critical thinking, elaboration of evidence, and critical reading. We did this over the summer through the Effective Educator Common Core State Standards grant that we were part of, that we were granted from the state, and also throughout the course of this year and also including last year for all staff, not only the instructional leaders of our school district, our principals, assistant principals, instructional coaches, and so on and so forth, but also bringing that down into our schools, specific to our teachers, with a focus on instructional practices that would address state standards. We revised our standards maps to align with the new state standards, and we've also provided additional instructional materials across all grade levels. We've enhanced our curriculum instructional assessment website to make it easier to find materials from a teacher's perspective. Our library of media website has included online opportunities for teachers to tie into authentic texts, videos that can tie in and support the instructional routines, and also increasing text resources purchased specifically for our schools. Likewise, in the implementation of SBAC, which is part B up here, we've completed our transition to the Common Core. We've spoken about that several times this evening, and we've aligned our district assessments and work samples to be more SBAC-esque. I don't know if that's a coined phrase, but we can coin it tonight, SBAC-esque, meaning that we look at our district interim assessments and a lot of our ongoing assessments to create them in an SBAC format, be it multiple steps, requiring students to read, comprehend various different texts, pulling evidence from the text all the way into the elementary schools as well. That gives us a good glimpse of their overall overall skills. And we've continued to update our technology in our schools through our 3-year technology plan. Part C of our strategic plan number 2 talks about the continuing our implementation of the K-12 literacy model that I believe you're all familiar with, and also the English language acquisition model that I believe you're also aware of. On the outer ring of both of those comes down to the cycle of planning, instruction, and assessment, but both of them require critical reading skills for our students and also purposeful speaking and listening, meaning the academic conversation. So a lot of vocabulary development, what schools call Tier 2, Tier 3, the content-specific vocabulary essential to ensuring the success in that content area, and also academic writing specific to the elaboration of evidence. How can we use evidence that we've collected from our reading to share our ideas, dig deeper with our ideas? And that's also actually found in our content areas outside of English language arts, where we see in our electives programs, math, sciences, social sciences, a lot more writing, conversation on an academic basis, be it informative, argumentative, or persuasive. And then finally, our focus support of English language acquisition program models. At the elementary level, we spoke earlier this evening that we have 3 program models. We have a Literacy Squared program model, we have a dual language program, and also an ESOL program model. And then Melissa spoke about the implementation of English 3D at the secondary, middle school level as well. That supports the overall focused continuation of our focus on our English language acquisition programs. I'm going to let the level directors add anything to Part C if they have any highlights that they'd like to add of our implementation, continuing implementation of the literacy model or the program model for English language acquisition, if they have anything they would like to highlight or share. No? Good. All right. So why Common Core State Standards? I want to take us back to 2010. That's the year that the state of Oregon and the Oregon Department of Education, the state board, adopted the Common Core State Standards at the same time as several other states. At one time it was 46. I'll just say several others at this time. But what we matter is that that is now our state standards that we are shooting towards and working towards. There's 5 basic areas of why we've adopted these state standards. The first one is around preparation. The standards are college and career ready. They were built in partnership with industry leaders, with researchers, and with colleges in mind about what essential skills are needed for our students to be successful beyond K-12 education. These skills focus around collaboration, communication, problem solving, critical reading, writing, speaking, and listening in all its facets in various different pieces. Paul asked about career technical education earlier this evening. With our new CTE center that's coming on board, with the CTE programs that we have in our high schools, those programs still require these skills in order to be successful out into the industrial world, and that is super important for us to keep focusing on. The second part is competitions. These standards are internationally benchmarked. Before, we had Oregon standards. You go to Washington, they have Washington standards. You go to California, they have California standards. We have students that move in and out of our school district and state pretty regularly. When you do not have a common set of standards, students come in with different skill sets and different ability levels. The Common Core allows us to internationally be benchmarked across the world to prepare our students for a global society, but at the same time, it creates equity between states for our students that are in transition, that move into and out of our school district and our state. Part 3 is equity. They are consistent for all. I just spoke about the differences between states, but also even within school districts. Within a state, there is differences on what standards were focused upon within the Oregon state standards previously to adopting the Common Core State Standards, and the sequence of how those standards were addressed. And so through this, we are better able to partner with school districts and with states to increase and address student mobility rates, materials and supplies, and college and career readiness, so we can have a guaranteed and viable student going out of our schools. Number 4 is clarity. The standards are focused, coherent, sequenced, and clear. If you look at a K-12 look at the standards, say in English language arts, you see the same themes and trends running through, and so students build upon these on a cyclical basis to ensure the success over time as they develop their own abilities cognitively, socially, emotionally through the years. And then finally, collaboration. The standards create a foundation for work collaboratively across states. I can speak from the experience that I've had within my own department. We have been in communication with school districts, specific around math, for example, from Washington, from California, about our materials, how are we structuring our professional development for our teachers, and that collaboration is super rich, and that's just outside of our state. To us, it's even more enhanced within our own state. Common Core state standards. I think it's important to have an understanding of what state standards do and what they will not do. They will inform meaningful classroom instruction. That's what standards are intended to do, give us the target. They will not tell teachers what to teach. They will help teachers tailor instruction to meet the needs of our students while not requiring teachers to dumb down instruction, and they will guide responsible use of assessments. The balanced assessment system that I think we were talking about earlier tonight, it allows us to create a balanced assessment system to support learning so we can be predictive at the end in mind while also staging it throughout to really understand what our students are able to know and be able to do. And also they will not force teachers to use select materials or tests. We have a lot of our teachers creating our own assessments based on the standards, based on their scope and sequence of instruction to inform their practices in the classrooms, what students need or not need for enrichment, enhancement, reteaching, or the like. So in review, standards are not learning materials. They're the targets. They are what students should know and be able to do at a given grade level. They inform our instruction. They help teachers know what students have and have not mastered. And they help parents, most importantly, understand what is expected of their children in school and beyond. Now, when we have new standards, we obviously need new assessments. And this is important because OAKS, one of the things that we talked about before, the OAKS assessment that we have been given is not necessarily in line with what we've been teaching. We've been teaching Common Core over the last year. Now, this is our second year, but we've been assessing through the OAKS system, and OAKS assessed Oregon State standards. So the school districts that were maintaining themselves using Oregon State standards were addressing an OAKS, but we, through Common Core implementation, were addressing the Common Core standards, but measured on an OAKS standard of assessment. So the summative assessment now is called Smarter Balanced. Smarter is actually an acronym. Can't tell you exactly what it says, what it means. I learned that just the other day doing some research on this, but it's a really long acronym. If you want to know what it is, I can get that for you. But we'll just call it Smarter Balanced, otherwise known as SBAC. It is a summative assessment, and there are some key components to this, and there are some key changes that I think as board members you're going to want to know about, and as schools that we've been talking about. First and foremost, it's administered during the last 12 weeks of the school year, as determined by a percentage of the school year completed. And that's an interesting component, because it's dependent upon the number of seat hours that you have, a percentage of the school year completed, in order to assess that. So at the elementary and middle school, it's, I believe, 65% of the school year must be completed before you can even access into and take the SBAC assessment. And at the high school level, it's 80%. Where with OAKS, and I'll get to this in another slide, but I'll just address it here since I'm going down this road, you are allowed to start testing on OAKS in October, November, and you had 3 opportunities throughout the course of the year to get that. Here with SBAC, it's a one-time, last 12 weeks of the school year, a percentage of the school year completed. Likewise, the structure of SBAC, there's 2 main components of that. There's a computer adaptive multiple choice test. This is similar to OAKS. If a student's scoring really well on these multiple choice questions, these questions will get harder and harder to see where the level of student and knowledge of the student lies. At the same time, if the student's not performing very well, they will make those questions more accessible to the student to really measure where those students are performing, so we have a good indicator of what students can or cannot do. That's similar to OAKS. OAKS right now is an adaptive multiple choice test. Likewise, there's going to be a performance task, and this is the one I think that's been getting the most conversation around, and that will be taken on a computer with a front-loaded of a lesson within the class. And I'll be talking a little bit about more of that later, and I can happily answer questions for you. And some of the examples that I have for you will show you what a performance task assessment will look like within SBAC. And then SBAC will nicely measure the standards that we are teaching. Being a field test site last year in my previous role, students came out of that experience saying it's nice to have a test that actually tests what we've been doing in the classroom, which was a really great reassurance and reinforcer for us that we're on the right track as a school district. While Oaks does not do that, SBAC will. It also accurately describes student achievement and growth towards our standards of targets, and it's part of an overall program evaluation of our schools, our school district, and our state's accountability systems as measured by these Common Core state standards, achievement compacts, and graduation and goals. And also, it will provide us a true indication of the knowledge and skills required for our students to be college and career ready. And that is something that I think is a really powerful indicator that we're going to learn about and build on over time. So how is SBAC different? Obviously, I've also already talked about the testing windows later. I shared the percentages of what that's going to look like in comparison to Oaks. There is only one opportunity to take the test in comparison to the 3 opportunities. At high school, Kelly spoke about earlier that some students start taking the Oaks assessment currently their sophomore year. SBAC is only a junior level test. And so if students are not successful, though we believe they will be successful on this assessment, if they are not successful, the students will take what's called essential skills work samples to show a body of evidence that they can show their skills associated with the expected learning targets at that grade level with that level of rigor by that grade level. The test requires a high level of computer skills. Keyboarding in particular is important, but also students need to know how to manipulate the computer through mouse, through highlights, through drag and drops, and so on and so forth. I personally have a 3rd grader and 5th grader. I'm not worried about their content because I see the work they're doing. I hear them justifying and explaining and providing evidence. Me as a parent, it's the keyboarding skills that I am most thoughtful of as a parent. Students will be asked to answer multiple step questions. Our knowledge of this is what we grew up with story problems. But it's story problems and then another story problem related on the answer to the first story problem, and they're going to have to then connect that to and build upon their answer over time. And so that is different, where Oaks is a multiple choice test currently, and students will be required to provide a constructive response. What that means is that they're going to be required to have and take multiple sources of information, read it, assess it, take notes on it, and compile a written response to a prompt. And you'll see an example of that in here, where they have to use evidence to support their claims and arguments associated with the given prompt. So I've referenced the handouts a lot about what Smarter Balance looks like. So I'll pass these around, and I'm happy to answer questions that you might have with that. It's broken into 3 or 4 sections: the computer adaptive test in English and math, what that will look like, and the performance task assessment in math and reading or English as well. All right, so those are all the slides I have. So I'm happy to answer questions that you have.
Paul?
What accommodations are being made for the special needs students?
Yeah, that's a great.
Since it's high computer usage and
Yeah.
some of them aren't.
Yeah, that's a great question. There are, and I think Ruth might be able to address this as well, students that are on IEPs have very specific test accommodations that are written into a student's IEP and then are monitored and supported as the students are taking the assessments. Ruth, do you want to elaborate?
There are very specific accommodations that they will allow us to do, but I guess I have to say I'm going to wait and see.
Mm-hmm.
Not as many as I'd hope.
Okay, I mean, I was thinking about, hang on, Jim, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
I was thinking about the hearing impaired student as well, when you talk about the listening and the speaking portions, which is not necessarily a group we think of, but is a subcategory under the special needs.
Yeah, the SBAC itself, there is a video component to that, but I would believe, and this is kind of the wait and see, if there is a video that the student is going to have to see.
And the visually impaired student, the same problem.
Right.
Bigger problem.
Yeah, and then there's
Kind of like a multiple choice answer on top of a multiple choice.
That was
Yeah.
a constructive response.
Story problem on
Yeah,
story problem.
that's a constructive response. I know for the visually impaired students, there is a auditory component that the students will be able to plug headphones in and have that information provided to them. That's accessible for all students. But the video for the deaf, hard of hearing student, that would be something that we're going to want to wait and see what that test looks like.
I have one more question. You may or may not know the answer, which is fine, or you can make one up.
I would rather not make one up for you.
Is the district infrastructure computers, are we ready?
That's a great question.
Or, I mean, before you could stretch it out, as you pointed out, from October to some point in infinity. But now, with it only falling all within a 12-week span, if it goes down one day, you're going to lose a whole lot of opportunity.
Yeah. Kelly,
Kelly,
you and
I
I
saw
were just in a
Kelly's
meeting
hand.
about this, so do you want to?
Yeah, we had a meeting about this and other logistical concerns, and a representative from our technology department was there. They have done an analysis of all of our machines that we would be using in testing, as well as our bandwidth. We seem to be as ready as any school district is, and our equipment's ready.
It doesn't make me feel better.
Okay.
I work with a lot of schools. That
We-
doesn't make me feel better.
We may need more headphones. That was something that came up in our discussion, but our machines are ready, and even our internet provider is ready for providing us more bandwidth in case that spikes.
And they're ready for all of the schools in the area to do it on the same days.
Yeah, that's not so different from our Oaks testing, other than to say there'll be more of a concentration.
Right.
They're even ready with some extra computers if one happens to go on the fritz at the wrong moment.
And I'm thinking the whole network going down.
Yeah.
Which I understand it does occasionally. Okay.
I'm going to stay on this side, Jim, and then Nancy, and then.
So I guess it's more of a concern than a real question, Neil. When we have 59% of our district living in poverty, and you talk about your kids at home and my kids at home, I don't think our kids are the ones I'm concerned about, because you and I probably have laptops at home, maybe multiple laptops at home for our kids to use. I'm really concerned about the keyboarding skills for those folks who live in poverty, who the only computer they ever access is maybe at our schools, and I've been in our schools. We don't have a computer per kid all day long for that child to practice their keyboarding skills. I'm real concerned about the ability for students who their only access is at school in the limited time they have computer access in our schools, which is getting better, don't get me wrong, but the ability to take a test of the type that we're seeing, and when I talked to Doug Costi at the Department of Ed in their assessment about this, he said, yeah, it's a very different skill level of keyboarding than what students have ever done in the past. And when you have poverty levels like we do, 59% of our kids, I'm assuming most of those kids may not have access to a computer at home where they get to play on it, do other things, surf the web, do some homework. I have real concerns about the ability of not only our students, but students across the state to meet these computer skill levels with limited access to the technology.
Yeah, Jim, I don't think anybody would say contradictory to that. And I think my point of my own concern is a projection of, if I have a concern like this, I'm sure there's concerns like you spoke about everywhere. I do know the schools are working to develop keyboarding skills within the students through library media programs, keyboarding during the elective wheel classes or computer classes at the secondary level, but it is a limited resource to a lot of students with a limited amount of time, and that's a challenge that we face and that we're going to be working towards.
And considering the largest level of cut we made in the recession time period was eliminating our library and media skills teachers at most of our schools, that's a real concern.
Nancy, and Chris.
So throwing in a whole different realm of the impact of our prolonged budget crises. I just recently heard from a group of high school teachers about how the curriculum, the textbooks that they have aren't aligned at all, and that the newer textbooks, if they had them, have formative assessments in them and sample, all kinds of curriculum supports that they don't have. The list of English textbooks, there was nothing that had been adopted in this century. You know, and some going back to maybe before some of you started school. Is there a way, I mean, there's no way that we have the resources to adopt textbooks in every subject at every level, you know, because we're so far behind. Are there curriculum supports for teachers that are like the teacher's guide for a textbook adoption that you can get without doing a textbook adoption, that would give them those kinds of supports? I mean, are there ways for us to think about ways to get more and more of those materials in the hands of our teachers so they're having to do less and less of that themselves? I mean, certainly everything that they get, they adapt to the needs of their students, but when you're inventing the wheel and inventing the wheel, it's exhausting. It just makes me wonder whether there's a way to get what they need without, you know, we're not going to adopt, you know.
Yeah, when you look at the true amount of what an adoption would be.
Right, in every subject at every level. I mean, we're so far behind. But this is my 6th year on the school board. I don't even know what a textbook adoption looks like. I've never seen one.
And I'll invite the level directors and Neil to add to this. What we have done over the last couple of years, knowing that we don't have the resources to do a full adoption in any particular subject area, is to refocus our program assistants on searching and researching and finding material that's open source content. And that's really the beauty of the Common Core, is that there's a ton of open source content that's available to us for free. But somebody has to grab that information, organize it in a way that makes sense for a 3rd grade teacher or a 5th grade teacher or a 7th grade science teacher. So we've refocused our PAs to do that. And also we've actually contracted with teachers over the summer to come together and look at a lot of different content and organize it in a way that makes sense to a classroom teacher. And as you said, Nancy, they will adapt it to meet their needs and the needs of their students. So I think we barely scratched the surface on that, but that's the strategy that we've used to get resources in the hands of teachers, knowing that we can't do a full-scale adoption. The resources that the board provided for us this year to purchase instructional materials is helping us plug some holes, and that's been enormously helpful. And the level directors can talk about the specific areas that we're using those dollars for, but that's helping mitigate and kind of bridge the gap that we have. So that helps.
And do we still have program assistants in every subject?
That's where we contract with teachers. For example, we don't have a social science, social studies program assistant, but we bring together social studies teachers at the middle school level and at the high school level to develop curriculum units and maps for teachers to use.
We did purchase resources, like Salam was saying, for language arts teachers at the elementary, middle, and high school level this year. And those resources are being used out in classrooms, and teachers are very thankful because there is clear alignment to Common Core state standards. And they're not having to go search high and low for resources. They're right there available to them in their classrooms.
And we've created what we've called live binders, which are links through library and media websites or curriculum instruction assessment that teachers can go in by unit of study or by grade level content, click in there and have resources, materials that they can pull up that have been compiled through the teacher collaboration teams or committee work, that they don't have to go searching for an article on this certain topic. It's there for them, and they can click in there or see video links. If you haven't seen the Library Media Sciences website, it's very impressive, very supportive to our teachers, very user-friendly, accessible. Same with the curriculum instructional website for all grade levels, elementary, middle, and high school.
Chris?
I'm going to call back on my education background a little bit to you and explain something about my concern about Smarter Balanced. I think the Smarter Balanced folks have done what I think from everything I've read, a really pretty good job of being able to define clearly those skills and attributes that they feel that our students need to have when they go on to college if they are going to go ahead and become the kind of employee that business and industry needs in this country to keep us competitive. That said, I think that I am very concerned that much of what I see happen with Smarter Balanced Standards is that it tends to push down certain learnings to earlier and earlier grades and ages, when in fact there's an awful lot of data and research out there that says that students are simply not cognitively ready to do those things yet at those ages. That I have a number of friends who are involved with early childhood education who are very concerned because the kindergarten readiness test is actually, in their estimation, a kindergarten completion test, and that in fact students are being told that they're underprepared because they don't have the skills now at the beginning of their kindergarten experience that they really should have at the end of kindergarten, and it's making kids feel unsuccessful. And I feel the same way sometimes about some of the instruction that I see being pushed in from high schools down into middle schools, and I feel the same way often about what I see college professors saying that high school students ought to have when they graduate in order to be ready for college, that it tends to push these skills down into earlier ages where kids just aren't ready to do it yet. And so my concern is ongoing and will continue. I continue to support Common Core as something that we ought to be doing. I continue to support it because I think it does clearly define what our best and brightest students ought to be able to do when they graduate from high school. But I said on purpose, best and brightest students. So my concern, what do we do with the 30% more on top of the 30 to 40% of our students who are not passing standards now? And now we're going to have, 40 to 50% of our students passing those standards. How do we continue to encourage students that they are in fact ready to go on and be technically trained? They are in fact ready to go on and do other kinds of things, but they may not still be passing, meeting the benchmark for the thing at whatever particular grade they happen to be at that time. And I'm very concerned that it could raise dropout rates and lower graduation rates. It could do a whole lot of things that are counterproductive to what we're trying to do. And so I don't really have a question in there other than an encouragement for us as a school district to think about that and to think about ways to use Smarter Balance, but at the same time not let it defeat kids and not let it defeat teachers and not let it defeat schools. How do we use it for what it's good for, because I think it's going to be good for some good stuff, without allowing it to defeat other people? And that's what I'm going to come back to my results policy, because I think the way we have our results policy written right now does not do that. And I would love to see us have a good discussion. I would leave it totally up to the school district to come to us and say, what is it, what kind of a score would a student get who's on Smarter Balanced, who's headed for four-year college and is going to be successful there? More theoretical learning, textbook discussion, higher order thinking kinds of things. And what kind of score might a kid get on this Smarter Balanced test if that kid's perfectly ready to go into technical training, but may not be successful if they get into a four-year kind of a situation? What other measures do we have? AP, you mentioned a whole bunch that you're tracking. There's all sorts of things the district's already paying attention to. I would love for us to have our results policy reflect our intention to see our kids come out ready for whatever they want to do next without defeating those that don't make the top goal. And I'm afraid Smarter Balance is the top goal. That's my fear. And so I will just say again, I would love to see us be the district that leads the way in the state to talk about what is it really to mean 40, 40, 20. What do our kids look like when they're going to the top 40? What do they look like in the middle 40? What do they look like in the bottom 20? I shouldn't say bottom, the 20% that go straight to work. I think we're at a crucial stage in education where we need to do some good thinking, some nuanced thinking about how we affect overall, our district, our teachers, our schools, and our kids.
All right, thanks, Chris. Any other discussion or questions? Paul?
I said one. Do we have any idea how much extra time this is taking, placing on the teachers to get these lessons ready, to look up the websites you're talking about, and to do all of the extra work? Do we have any idea how much extra time it's taking?
I do not. To speak specifically about time it takes for them to access these sites, they're all linked through our school district website, so a couple clicks away. And
But they still have to find the time to do it? No?
Mhm. Well, yeah.
Okay. And have we taken anything else off their plate so they can do this work? I mean, they still have to do duties, I assume, and teach classes and.
Right,
things,
yeah.
so.
They obviously have their prep time and those items as they
PLCs
have,
take
so.
time.
I was just going to say that during PLCs, they take time during PLCs to look for these materials together, look at access resources while they're sitting together.
And how often do PLCs meet?
A lot of them meet once a week.
And that's how much time?
Usually it's-
Depends on the team.
Yeah.
I'm just curious
Yeah.
again, so they do that during their prep time, or do they do that some other time during the day?
Depends on the site and what teachers decide to do with
What
it.
I saw at Chavez was a team of teachers that were very purposefully identifying, based on some formative assessments, weak areas with this 6 kids and weak areas with those 3 kids, and purposefully subdividing that workload so that one teacher was saying, I'm going to develop something to help those 6. Another teacher said, I'm going to help. And then they figured out ways to reschedule their class times so that they were breaking kids into groups. And I saw a very purposeful thing to do that. I truly believe that what I saw at Chavez is not the norm yet.
Okay,
If that were the norm, that would,
right, I was gonna
that's
say, if that were the norm, that would be a
Yeah,
happy day.
but
purposeful PLC work.
yeah, it was really impressive to watch, but I don't believe it's the norm.
And at the middle school level, schools have chosen to extend their days 1 day a week so they can have time for PLCs, and then they leave early on the last day of the week.
Any other questions or discussion around this? All right, I think that wraps up the agenda for the night.
Yep.
Before I adjourn, this is the last meeting that Salam sits in on with the school board during his career here at Salem-Keizer. The results we're looking at tonight, a lot of it is driven by an impact you've had on staff, as I know it's a team effort, but part of that team's leaving, and you had a big part of where we're going right now and how we're doing. Even though there are some little low spots, I'm not worried about those at all personally. So thank you very much for putting in some time for Salem-Keizer. The community really appreciates it. Thanks.
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of the district and to contribute to the work of the district and to be able to serve our students, our community. So I appreciate the board giving me that opportunity. Thank you.
He's
so
not
much.
going far. He's still in town.
I'm gonna be
I'm sure he'll stop by at school board meetings all the time.
Oh, I'm sure he will.
Sure. So you'll- yeah.
He might at least watch. All right, on that, we are adjourned.